What up, world? It's your boy Mark Walter Ward, the Super Fact Show. Today, there's this great interest in new journalistic endeavor, objective, which I guess is original in these days and times. The Boycott Times, and we have the editor-in-chief Mordecai Lyon with us today. How you doing today, sir?
What's going on, man? Good to see you. Good to be with you.
I'm hanging in there. Like I said, I'm highly intrigued by what what you're doing over there. Can you explain what the Boycott Times is and also the impetus for its creation?
Yeah, I'd love to. The Boycott Times is the culmination of years of being dissatisfied with the journalism and the coverage that I was getting, since I was a little kid, since I realized that we were being lied to. And I feel like everybody, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, know that you're being lied to in some respect. And for me, that came, at a pretty early age, and then entering into, adulthood and seeing the fact that all of the major media outlets, regardless of what side they're on, are financed by Wall Street and by the same, capital. And so they're not going to critique that instigating force of evil. So it already from the jump, you have these huge multinational corporations conducting our investigative journalism. That's insane. Investigative journalism used to be people who were trying to hold power accountable. Now investigative journalism is when you get a leak and then they have to report upon it. They don't want to, but they got to. And even on NPR, you'll hear them when they have to do an investigative piece on Facebook. What do they say before the piece starts? Facebook is a sponsor of NPR. And then they do the piece because they have to, because they didn't find out that information. They got a leak. They had to report on it. So we need, ultimately, I hope that the Boycott Times can evolve into a place where we're conducting real investigative journalism, holding power accountable. Right now, we're growing, and we are a collection of voices from around the globe who are voices of dissent, voices who are checking the bullshit, saying, whoa, you're saying a lot of nice words. There's a lot of symbolism here. Where's the action? Where's the legislation? Where's the abolition? Where's the real changes that we need in our society as we look at a countdown clock, not the one that Noam Chomsky likes to point to, the atomic bomb clock, but a real clock of when is the human species going to be eradicated from this planet? And if we look at it from that terms, because there is a date, I don't know the date, and I don't know the amount of years, but I know that if we continue down this path of not treating the majority of the planet with humanity, gouging the resources.
Answering to the shareholders.
Exactly. So the Boycott Times is a place where we can start to gather the voices of dissent, the people who are no longer willing to take the bullshit anymore. And I think of boycott, I've been saying this as a praxis and as our, guiding principle of the Boycott Times, meaning so far, we haven't actually called for a specific boycott. We haven't supported vocally a boycott to this point. We probably will in the future. But to this point, boycott is us saying we have had enough of the bullshit. We've had enough of the way things are. We've had enough of hearing how you're covering different media events. We're not interested in being associated with the left or the right or any kind of alternative media that's out there. We are a group of people who are saying, no more. We're done. We're done with the way things have been. So eventually, I hope it evolves into investigative journalism. Right now, it is a place where you're going to get a lot of different views of dissent from all different point of views.
Voices like Tef Poe and
absolutely Tef Poe, who's the one of the editors and also the executive director of the Boycott Times, fundamental to the project. He encapsulates what we are all about. And what is that? It's revolution of mind, of self, of the political order of things. It's a revolution across the board. And Tef also is a perfect person to be the executive director because he is all about love. And that's what we talk about a lot on the Boycott Times, where, and this also comes from Dr. Cornel West and Tef, where they love so deeply. I've never met two individuals, Cornel West and Tef Poe, who love so deeply. And so all of their fire of fighting the injustices in the systems of tyranny that invade our everyday lives, it's the love that drives them. And
I know what you mean, because like some people are like angry, and then rightfully so in many cases, and then some people just have this desire to improve the human condition, and it's a compulsion, and you know, yeah, I'm particularly familiar with both of those individuals working, and you can tell that they have to leave the world a better place than they found it. And you know, and that's why I'm so intrigued by something like the Boycott Times, because I'm not even sure if there even really is such a thing as media as opposed to propaganda for the most part, and B, I'm not even sure that there's such a thing as two-party systems. I mean, it all seemed to be the same shit to me. I mean, like, for one thing, people don't know that most, you know, now Democrats is on the gun control shit, but you know, most gun control laws was created to prevent Black people from having firearms in the South.
Exactly, man. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, you know, if we're being real, the Boycott Times is in a way counter propaganda. You know, we're saying we're not the New York Times. We're not your bullshit Fox News. We're not your propaganda from the people, the small 1% that Bernie Sanders is always talking about that controls the media. We're not that. We are the people looking at all of the playing field from a very insider viewpoint and saying, no, we're calling out the bullshit, you know? So I think that's what makes us different. Is I'm not going to pretend like we're objective, because I think objectivity is weaponized to say people who are supportive of specific moments and movements are somehow not being objective, as if we're doing activism journalism, as if that's a bad thing. To me, that's a good thing. We need more of that, and we support groups like recently on the Boycott Times. We've published pieces by the Debt Collective, who are fighting to abolish all $1.7 trillion of student debt, which Biden actually can do by executive order. And we're also supporting Columbia students who are on tuition strike right now, trying to fight Columbia. And that's an Ivy League kind of prestigious thing, but it also connects to a movement in Europe right now where students are going on rent strike. So there are more and more people who are starting to say, okay, we see all the fucking bullshit. We see the fuckery. We know what you've been up to. Excuse my language.
Oh,
but
nah, you can cuss here. You can definitely cuss here.
But at the end of the day, nothing is going to really move them unless we fuck with their money. And if we fuck with, so how do we fuck with their money? We go on collective economic withholding. And if we can, we even put that money in escrow into another account, so we can use it as capital force to say, you have to change the laws. That's how laws are changed. They're not changed by getting a progressive person elected and then waiting 30 years to have them work through Congress. Nah, to get something done is to fuck with their money. So that's what we have to do. That's why boycotting specific companies or products or people or institutions are so important, and to come together under a roof of that, to say, hey, you know what? Instead of paying our taxes this year or overpaying our taxes so we can get a tax rebate at the end of the year, which is a way they trick us into submission with taxes, you know what we're going to do? We're going to calculate it. We're not going to overpay. And then the amount that we owe you at the end of the year, we're all going to put it together in one account, one escrow account under a nonprofit legal organization like Legal Aid or some shit like that. And we're going to have a tax strike and say, government, you must stop this war against the people of this country, or else we are withholding our taxes. And then you point to concrete laws and statutes that you want revoked or enacted. And that's the way things can happen. Otherwise, as Tef Poe often says, we're just screaming at buildings.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even believe in government as something for the people, because like, look at it like this. You're talking about banks, right? So if the government cared more about me than the bank, the bank can just go in my account and take something out whenever they want to. I can't just go in the bank when there's been an injustice with me and take my money from them. And that's perfectly legal and regulated. And I believe actions speak, dictate what things really are. So that right there proves to me that the government cares more about that bank than it cares about me.
That's the craziest thing, is we think we have private relationships with our banks. And sometimes people, are doing their banking in small community trusts that take themselves out of this equation. But if you're
then you still got to pay a water bill or an electric bill where they can still do the exact same shit.
Absolutely. You're still on the grid. And it is wild that they can come in and just freeze your account like that, because they own the banks, because the Federal Reserve system is a system that is tiered, right? So the federal system owns and dictates the financial policy, but their primary outlets into the world are the JP Morgans, the Citibanks, the Bank of Americas, all of them. And then that's their tentacles into the system that then finances everything, owns all of the mortgages. We don't talk about that enough. The majority of houses, the people don't own their houses. When you
floating interest rates is an immoral practice.
Absolutely. All of a sudden you get the thing jacked up to 20% when you thought it was, some.
I mean, a Judeo-Christian society, I thought Jesus was whipping the money lenders. Like, I don't see how you can have laws based on the Bible and have variable, non-fixed rate mortgages.
I can't.
I mean, like you said, it's just a bunch of hypocrisy. One hypocrisy after the other.
I can't agree more, man. It's painful to wake up into a society every day where you see such just such lies and deceit and disinterest.
Well, you talk about the Federal Reserve, and then in the education system leaves people not necessarily with the tools they need to navigate the current world, especially financially. Like the Federal Reserve, for every dollar they print, it creates a 17-cent debt that the taxpayer pays. Like literally. So all these stimulus packages is creating debts that downstream we're gonna have to pay. Our kids are gonna have to pay. We're gonna get worse public services.
Oh, it's insane.
We're getting out to that point where the income inequality is going to be a tipping point. And then, that's why we need things like the Boycott Times. But you sound very passionate about it. So what would you do if like a ag-gag whistleblower or Snowden came to you? You seem to me like a man who would have the heart to print that shit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually at the Boycott Times, we've talked about this, our editorial board. We are, as if we go through certain security checks and we can authenticate something to be true, we're okay publishing anonymously or under my name or under the Boycott Times name. I can't be anonymous to us, but if I have a source that I trust and believe in, who's come to me to publish something, I'll publish it and protect their name if that's what is required. And I'll take the heat, because I don't think there's a lot of, I went to Columbia Journalism School. I went to the most prestigious journalism school in the world, graduated in 2014, and they try to instill all these rules and all these barriers and jargon and barriers of entry, including grammar, that stops people from telling the real truth. And one of those is you got to name the source. You don't always have to name the source, but you want to try to name the source. And for me, a lot of the people who are writing for us are global, where there's real, we have violence going on here in all of our, communities, really. But it can be even worse in South America and different
Mexico,
areas.
yeah, you can't always name the source. I mean, if our drug laws don't just hurt our citizens, they create the cartels, and everybody in Mexico damn sure ain't down with the cartels. And if you had someone in the cartel providing you relevant journalistic information, you would be irresponsible as a human being to report the source.
Absolutely. So yeah, if anybody that's listening or watching does have a pitch that they want to come and try to write for us, or to if they have a whistleblow opportunity, we take all of our inquiries at the smoke at boycottx.org.
What have been some of your more needle moving, let's say, like you have a website? Is there an actual publication as well?
Yeah, well, it's boycottx.org is the online publication. We are going to be having hard copies coming out. We got a shop up with selling some merch to support our self-funded. Right now we're 100% independent, self-funded media outlet. really just running it out of love and out of an abundance of belief that we need to just start calling out the bullshit, as I said. And
what have been some of the highlights thus far?
Some of the highlights we have on our staff, Christine Mungai, who's based out of Nairobi, Kenya. She's an amazing writer. She was actually a Neiman Fellow, and
what's she covering? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, she actually covered the U.S. election. Her one of her most read pieces was her covering the U.S. election from a perspective in Kenya, and comparing it to an election that she witnessed in Kenya, where she basically called out a lot of the things that happened, the violence. So in Kenya, you'd have to go back and read the piece. It's really an amazing piece with an amazing piece of art. And it calls out how Trump could potentially steal the election, but either way, how it was going to inevitably lead to violence and could lead to like a rebellion. And this piece came out before the election, and so many of the things that she wrote about were just dead on. And that piece gave us a whole new global audience, which was fantastic. Tef's pieces always blow up, and they're always very, very spicy and filled with just truth and hard truth, and definitely make people look at themselves and unsettle themselves.
It's very thought-provoking.
Very thought-provoking.
It's the kind of stuff you'll think about like 9 hours later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier a couple of movements that are going on. The Debt Collective has a student loan debt strike going on, and they're trying to challenge the Biden administration to abolish all of the $1.7 trillion in student debt. And Rochelle Brooks, she wrote a piece for us of why she's striking and why she's on strike. Unbelievable piece. That piece blew up. That was one of our most read pieces of the year. I think it's called Why I Strike, or Why I Debt Strike. Incredible piece. But we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We just announced yesterday the creation of a new series called Freedom School, which is going to be hosted by Lorgia Garcia Pena, who's an amazing professor, author, philosopher, love warrior. And she is going to be interviewing people from around the globe, a lot of academics, and translating their work into an accessible language where we can actually use the knowledge, the subjugated knowledge, as we call it, to understand where we are and how we can fight the current system with the history that has been hidden from us. So that's going to be an incredible series. And so yesterday we published a Q&A. It's a YouTube, and also up on YouTube, an interview between the two of us discussing these themes and also kind of setting the intro for the Freedom School, which she'll then run from here.
All right. Well, so, I don't want to spoil any of the content, but I'm definitely going to go check that out. But what's one piece of history that most people aren't aware of that they should be, whether it's from your conversation with her in general? Like if all of a sudden they said, Mr. Lyon, you're in charge of the national curriculum, but you only get to add one thing.
Man, I would try to add in, Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States as my one thing. So that's going to cover a lot of bases.
That's a strong pull. There you go.
Because, we need to understand that the history that has been instilled into us and that is still fundamentally being taught to all of the future leaders of the world is based on a lens of white supremacy and of colonization and horrible atrocities and landing on stolen ground and on the blood of human beings that were enslaved. We need to fundamentally rethink how we got here, and also who is being subjected to those conditions now, whether it's, people in Palestine living in apartheid conditions, or people in East St. Louis who are also living in apartheid conditions. So I think that it's really important for us to understand that the history that we've been indoctrinated with is not the history of the 7 billion people on this planet.
You're open for open, honest, intellectual debate?
Yeah, man. What you got?
I kind of disagree with the white supremacy part.
Talk to me.
I feel like more of it's like a landed white man thing.
Explain.
I feel like it was let's say like a top 5 or 10, like they talk about like white people were the only people with access to college back in the day, right? But it was usually white people with titles were the only people with access to college. Most of the white people were workers. You know, sometimes I think the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing 95% of white people who are doing all this work to think that their system or however you want to frame it, because they're getting the same. I mean, I've been to prison. I took a rough ride. I've felt the hot hood, and not saying that makes me anything, but all this. Anytime some evil policy gets implemented to put down any race or group, it's eventually going to touch every race or group. And so poor white people, like when you were naming stuff just now, and you know, I lived in DC my whole life and all that shit, but like I've been to Appalachia, I've been to Flint, you know, both vastly different communities, both incredibly fucked up and abandoned by the government.
No, man, I think that's really well put, and it's a nuance that we need to talk about, and that we don't talk about it enough. And sometimes this conversation of white supremacy gets lumped under, you know, almost adds to the fire and polarizes even more, because you are right. We're really targeting a very small percentage of the people who were the landowners with the titles, as you said, and the people who, you know, have manipulated people to fight for a cause that just insulates them, that they don't even believe in. Like Donald Trump, at the end of the day, he's been doing business with people from all different, you know, backgrounds all over the globe for his whole life. You know, he used the propaganda to gain control and popularity. I'm not saying he's not a racist and shit, but I am saying that he knew what he was doing. He's been doing business with Carlos Slim, you know, in Mexico for his, you know, down doing his hotel deals and doing all this. He's not, you know, at a certain level. It's got nothing to do.
Soulless greed don't give a fuck about race.
It's only about the dollar bill.
Yeah, soulless greed will get with anybody.
And I totally think that we need to shift the conversation to looking at, you know, I guess to follow the money. Simple as that. You follow the money. You see who controls the resources. You really track back, you know, how and who to target with specific boycotts, and sometimes public displays of humiliation to actually enact changes. Otherwise, it gets locked up in Congress and you never hear about it again. And I think, you know, that's where the boycott comes in as a practice, is saying, okay, who is, instead of letting them continue to polarize us and make, you know, people who are being exploited hate each other, why don't the exploited people of the country come together, target their anger at the people who are exploiting them instead of buying their fucking products? You know,
right.
Like, to me, that's where we need to get to. And that's where the investigative work comes in. And that's where, you know, social media campaigns come in to let people know what products, you know, we might not want to buy. Like, I'm doing my best to not eat bananas. I know that sounds simple, but the banana republics and the history of Chiquita and the United Fruit Company, and, you know, a lot of these different fruit companies,
Del Monte, things of that nature.
It's horrible. And what they're doing even to today, it's legalized slavery. So it's insanity.
And they fuck the environment up bad, but then make you feel bad for driving a car.
So if we can all just decide that we do have a individual responsibility and power, and sometimes we feel like we're shouting into a vacuum, and honestly, the Boycott Times is a platform for those people to come together and shout.
Yeah, I think it's great to attempt to separate media from corporations. I mean, I think if there is going to be any nonviolent revolutionary change, it's going to have to be through separation. Like we don't need division amongst people. We need division amongst these entities, like corporations, governments, all this shit, lobbyists, all this shit shouldn't be tied together. Like, I mean, like they clearly balling on the same team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. 100%. We're not that stupid. Everybody can see it. Both sides can see it. That's why you had so many people following Sanders and Trump. They're both saying, you're all full of shit, you're lying, not to mention 100 million people that were eligible to vote did not vote. That's not nothing. We need to talk about that. Yeah, they both got record numbers of votes, but more people didn't vote at all. And I want to talk to those people, and I want to know about what those people want to see changed. And I want them to enact the change. And I want us to say, what are we doing? This is insanity. This is an illusion of democracy, an illusion of what we want to call capitalism or government. It's literally just a straight out fleecing of the majority of the people by a few small people of all different ethnicities and backgrounds who control the resources and decide that their accumulation of wealth is more important than the basic like welfare of the majority of the population.
And the future and the future of the planet, to be real.
And the future of the planet. It's in that, and like I said earlier in the interview about our expiration date. If we want that expiration date to be long and we want to flourish, we need to get those people away from the levers of control. And that's why identifying them through investigative journalism or just through repurposing the work that has already been done, because a lot of great work has already been done. And I think immediately of I think it's called Dark Money and the Koch brothers and all that stuff. Like there's so many things we know. There's so many products that we buy. There's toilet paper. I think it's like Quilted Bounty or I can't remember which one it is now. See, even I can't remember. But there's certain toilet paper that were literally funding the Koch brothers, absolute terror on the globe. And it's insane. And we can stop it together. If we know, if we educate ourselves, if we can come together, and if we can purposefully spend our money locally with people who we know instead of with these multinational corporations.
So one of the biggest challenges you must face is how do you draw in young viewers while discussing dense economic topics?
That's a great question. And, I think that we have been lacking in that department a tiny bit, but there's two things. One, we're also trying to empower the reader, not just inform the reader. So that means we're coming in with art and music and, information that is critical to not only our minds, but to our souls. So you have Tef Poe making original music. You have original art with every piece. And, eventually this will spawn out into live festivals and music and concerts and events and empowerment sessions and a real freedom school where we're teaching people the skills of citizen journalism so that they can go out and be correspondents and give out grants for that purpose. So
I think you can do it, brother. I mean, America just learned what selling short was. So why can't the Boycott Times get people interested? I mean, kill a mic with the banks and,
And I wrote a piece about that, about the Reddit stuff, and it's called Wall Street Boycott, because it actually was a boycott, even if it wasn't thought of as that. When you look at what happened, it was a show of force and power and a exposing of the financial institution that
it was almost a steel man Trojan horse, which I had never seen before. Like that was an amazing combination of.
Well, better said. Exactly. You nailed it.
So the crypto, but on that same things, you can get young people. I see Jim Jones as a cryptocurrency. I mean, there's ways, because I'm fully convinced that one of the best ways to improve shit is to get people aware of their finances and not start their life in debt, not just student debt, but debt in general. I mean, if you think about it, in many places where you live, signing a lease is incurring debt because it's not a guarantee that the job market's going to be like New York City. Your job could go away like that, but you still got 7 months left on your lease.
Absolutely, man. Now you're talking my language. This is our only way out is fighting the debtor's prison that has literally traversed the globe. Like, we are all in debtor's prison, even rich people, man. Like, even these not the top rich people, but like rich people making a six figures, they're in debt too, man. They're in this revolving, reoccurring payment debt system that has sucked us into oblivion. And on that, I always think of Andrew Ross's phenomenal book. It's a short book. It's hella accessible, called Creditocracy. And Creditocracy just lays it out. And it's a case for debt refusal. It's showing how they don't care what we talk about. I'm allowed to be as revolutionary as I want because I'm in $80,000 of debt in my student debt, and because I'm paying reoccurring payments on my Netflix and my car and my health insurance and all this nonsense. So I'm in the debtor's prison. I'm in the system, even if I'm in my house and I feel like I'm free. I'm not free. And until we end that imprisonment, the rest of it is really just trying to put out the symptoms of that central fire. You know, everything else is symptoms. All the fuckery that we're fighting are symptoms of this indebtedness and this system of oppression that we can't even get out from under. And they pretend like the American dream exists and we can just get rich as fuck one day. That we all think it's going to be us one day, and then all our friends are going to. Nah, man, this is a system that is doing what it's meant to do, which is making you sit your ass on the couch, staring at a device, scrolling. What did they used to show us back in the day? How did the government use to torture people? They literally would torture people, showing them different images. Now we just do that to ourselves all day. It's insane.
That's a good point.
It's insane. What are we even doing anymore? What have we stopped to think what we're doing and how we're consuming and how we're treating each other? Like, it's insane.
Well, I mean, you know, they say that you can't tear down the master's house with the master's tools. And I kind of disagree with that. I think look at what they want, and they clearly want financial power. So then the answer is clearly to level the playing field, you need to accrue financial power.
You know, I agree and I disagree. And it's something that I've said before, is what you just said, because I think that one of the tools is to get revolutionary people to say, I'm an anti-capitalist. I don't fuck with money, Well, then all of a sudden you're neutered. You're neutered in this current grid. However, so I do think that it's very important to empower ourselves through things like cryptocurrency and figuring out how we can,
better disbursement models.
Absolutely. But then on the other side that I was going to say is that we should also be thinking about what would a local cryptocurrency look like, where we left our currency within the zip code in which we lived. And so that we were thinking of new financial models, public banks, local cryptocurrencies, ways to trade an hour of my time for an hour of your time, for my expertise or my labor or whatever it is for yours, and think about different ways to live together as a unit, and starting to, including having community farms and having having taxes go towards building a giant greenhouse or a small one in the back of everybody's house, doing things that actually are going to help people, not commodify people. If we can get there, I think that we can actually start to change our ways of being. So we can be anti-capitalist in theory, but we still have to be ruthlessly capitalistic in practice.
At least, in practice of acquisition. Yeah, I got you. But then what you do with it? All right. So now I like to end on this end. So I love that idea. But so if you bring the money and everything into the community, and the community has the responsibility to look out and everything, do you think the community has the responsibility to do things like shame, like, let's say, bail bondsmen and check cashing institutions out of it?
Yes, I think that here's the thing. It's not the individual that we are fighting. It's the institution that they have subscribe themselves to.
But clearly the government ain't gonna change the law to make it any more favorable. And
I think
so if it's on us to bring more, like, you know, like let's say you live in a food dead zone and your garden is gonna revolutionize people's lives, truly, because you bring fruit and vegetables into a child's life who doesn't have it. It's revolutionary: school performance, sleep, every metric. So if you have that responsibility to bring that good in, conversely, once you have the responsibility to drive that bad out, like car title loans and shit like that.
I agree 100%. But what I'm trying to say is that we can do it in a way where we can give those individuals an opportunity to say, I'm gonna stop doing what I'm doing. I'm going to join the community in a different way.
Got you.
You don't have to just necessarily boycott that individual until he leaves, unless they're going to, but you do boycott the institution.
Yeah, I should have made the distinction. Yeah.
But you do boycott the institution.
Don't kick Uncle Melvin out the neighborhood. Just make Uncle Melvin not be a bail bondsman. He
exactly.
Work at the co-op. Yeah.
Exactly. Because
I wasn't trying to get rid of Uncle Melvin. I was trying to get rid of the bond store.
Exactly. Because fundamentally at that point, then we can start thinking about, instead of like having some idealistic president or vice president or congressperson, let's fill our local government with people of and for the people, you know, and then we can start to actually make those fundamental changes that you talk about, because it's not that inconceivable for a local politician to negotiate a contract with some of these multinational corporations on behalf of their entire constituency and be the middle person between you and Verizon or whoever that, you know, multinational corporation is, to say, I'm going to get their cell phone bills down. I'm going to get the cable bills down. So maybe we can't necessarily get off it all the way right away. There are things that we can do. And if we start thinking outside the box and start thinking above and beyond the fucked up system that exists, because we can start to imagine a new system locally. A lot of our local governments allow that we can really restructure radically on a local level. The big national stuff that they have us focused upon, that stuff moves so slowly. So I think that to actually better change that, you know, I think, for example, it's a little controversial, but AOC, who's our one of our most progressive voices, you know, if she was able to revitalize and revolutionize her district in New York City, and all of a sudden you had poverty going down and you had more food co-ops and you had more, you know, just opportunities, then all of a sudden you'd be like, oh shit, she's onto something. Let's see if that can spread to the next district and the next district and the next district, instead of, you know, talking out about such huge national issues that we know are going to be hella polarizing for the other side. So, and
then sometimes they get changed right back. You know, it take 8 years to get national health care and then get changed right back.
Yeah, you get the you know, that immediate retraction of anything that you did. You clawed and you fought for 8 years, and then in a signature, it's gone. But that's the crazy thing. That's the power of the president. Biden was out here talking about how he promised when he was running for president to just erase $10,000 of every single person in student debt owed to the federal government, which is around $1.5 trillion. He literally has the power. This is researched and true. He can sign an executive order, and because of the way that the federal government owns that much student debt, he can erase it overnight. Now, the reason he won't, and the thing that no one wants to talk about, is that debt has already been bought and sold upon so many times that our you know, investment portfolios, that people who are lucky enough to have one, I'm not, but people who are, they're involved in it, just like they were involved in private prisons. That's why it's so hard to close those down, because they're also ICE facilities. The people he's talking about out here, I want to close all the private prisons. Well, you know what, Biden? Those same private prisons are running the ICE facilities. So are you also going to abolish ICE? Oh, no, you don't want to do that.
Or they'll game the stats and say they're putting terrorists there. All that's bullshit.
Exactly.
So to sum it all up, act locally, think globally, and read the Boycott Times.
Couldn't say it better than myself right there.
Well, shit, brother. Thank you for your time. Before we get out of here, is there anything you want to shout out?
Man, I appreciate you. Thanks for taking the interest, and thanks for the work that you're doing. You know, shout out Tef Poe, shout out Danny Hernandez, shout out Daima Buffins, shout out Ishmael. You know, you got to shout out the family too. But I got a lot of love in my heart for change, and I think that eventually it's going to come to a tipping point, as you said earlier. We're either going to move farther away from a chance, or we're going to come together and unite, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. I got hope, and like I said, man, it's been incredibly thought-provoking. It's been an honor for me as well. Thank you, and I'm rooting for you, and hopefully we can touch base again sometime down the road.
Appreciate it, man. If you want to support, go to boycottx.org, buy yourself one of these hats, a third eye hat or a shirt. That's the only thing that's funding our operation right now, other than sweat and tears and blood. So love y'all. Thanks for showing up.
I'll do that. All right, man. You have a good day.
Peace.
Peace.